Hope everyone's having a good day today. And we'll give it one more second to pop up over on the on our YouTube. All right, perfect. So, welcome everybody to the Midwest Concussion Clinic monthly lunch and learn here for January, the first one of 2026. For those of you that are new or just hopping in, my name is Matt Campbell. I'm the owner of the virtual Midwest Concussion Clinic. We are a clinic that specializes in treating and managing acute concussions and persisting post concussion symptoms. Every third Wednesday of the month at 12 p.m. Eastern, I do a free webinar for anybody who's interested on various concussion topics. This is the 12th, this is the 13th one now. That I've put together and gone through, and the whole goal is to make sure that we're covering topics that our patients talk about often, or people that are interested in the concussion world want to see. So I take time to make sure that I come in and talk about different topics every Wednesday, every third Wednesday of the month at 12 p.m. Eastern. So today's webinar, without further ado, is titled Understanding Your Concussion. The whole goal is to break down what the invisible injury is and give you an idea on those of you who may be struggling with your own concussion recovery. Somebody you know and love is out there working through their own concussion recovery, or your provider that's working with patients with concussions, that they want to understand a little bit more about what they're going through and how that you can help how you can help them move forward. So without further ado, let's get into it. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to chime in on the Instagram or TikTok live. If you have any questions that you may want answered, you can drop them in the chat for our YouTube channel. And if I miss it for whatever reason, I will go back through and review it and pull it up and answer it in a separate video for you. So, the whole goal of the monthly lunch and learn today is to go through, and we're going to talk about the four main objectives. We want to talk about what concussions are, how they, what they present as, give you some definitions on what's actually happening. Then we're going to talk about some misconceptions or things that are not necessarily accurate or are accurate but outdated when it comes to concussions, concussion recovery, and the mechanism of injury for concussions. And then we're going to talk about how concussion symptoms evolve and change over time and are different for each individual. So if you're somebody who's had a concussion before, it may look different. And if you're treating somebody with a concussion or trying to help with somebody navigate their own concussion recovery, that it may change from injury to injury, from time to time, from day to day. And then finally, we're going to wrap up a session based on advocating for your needs, what you can do to help answer questions, how you can advocate for yourself and get the support that you need during your concussion recovery. So, what is a concussion? Okay, that's always the key question, and it's something that forever has been misunderstood or misrepresented, especially as we get more and more information on what concussions are compared to what we used to think they are. So, first things first, concussions are a traumatic brain injury. In the healthcare world, we're trying to go through a whole new different system to grade our traumatic brain injuries, to look at the difference between acquired brain injuries, traumatic brain injuries, concussions. And right now, the title is still a mild traumatic brain injury, or an MTBI. Now, if you're somebody who's been through a concussion recovery, if you are somebody who works with concussions, one of the worst things that you can do out there is tell somebody who's been through this that it's a mild anything. Okay. The mild tag just lends it to be that it's not necessarily a life-threatening issue, but it is definitely a life-altering issue. So when we look at concussions, I don't talk to my patients at all about the tag of mild traumatic brain injury. Anytime that I'm talking with anybody that's a concussion, or anybody who will listen, when it comes to concussions, I am pushing for dropping that mild tag and just calling them what they are. They are traumatic brain injuries. We used to give you the idea that concussions are a bruise. Concussions do not cause bruising to the tissue of the brain on most cases. There are still some cases where there will be presented bleeding after a concussion, brain bleeding, epidural hematomas, subdural hematomas, bleeding that occurs in the tissue of the brain itself. But very, very rarely does that happen with a concussion. So concussions are not traditionally a bruise. So if it's not a bruise, what is it? Concussions are a disruption of the electrical signal caused by a direct hit to the head, neck, or body, or rapid jolting of the head, neck, or body that causes a shearing force to occur inside the brain tissue. Okay, now that's a lot. Okay, that's a lot to understand for some people. But what happens is structurally, the brain looks fine. Okay, I can argue microscopically that the brain looks different and that there's been changes to kind of neuron structure and connectivity. But for the sake of argument or the sake of education for the patients that I work with, the idea is that structurally, if I were to cut your head open and pull your brain out and look at it, it looks the exact same. Electrically, though, there is a disruption of the electrical signal inside the brain. Okay, so just like you have a heartbeat, you have a brain beat that's totally unique to you. Yours is completely different than anybody else's. Yours goes as fast or as slow as God or medication intended your brain to go. And the reason I bring that up is because certain types of medications out there will speed up the brain, slow the brain down based on ADHD, ADD, anxiety, depression. So there is medication that will change chemical speed and speed of processing of the brain. Okay. But right now, every person that's listening, every person that's following along or catching the recap afterwards, they have a brain beat that's unique to them. The brain will interpret images and it will interpret feelings and emotions and it will create them into an electrical signal and pass that electrical signal around the brain to the different parts of the brain. So when I sit down and try to explain it to people, what happens is the brain is a primarily visual processing center. It does a lot with visual input. We used to think that the eyes would form on day one or the brain would form on day one of fetal development, the eyes would form on day two and they would connect. Now we're starting to study more about fetal development. We realize that the brain and the eyes are the same organ. They form within each other, and then the eyes will spread out over time. Okay, that's a significant change in what we used to think. We used to think that, okay, well, they're good at communicating, they're great, but now that we start to look at thinking of them as the same organ, we realize that when the brain goes slow, the eyes will make up the difference. Okay. If somebody loses an eye, let's say they have an injury to an eye, we don't all of a sudden lose 50% of our visual field. Over time, the brain will open that visual field up just a little bit, so we get a lot more total visual field, but we lose a lot of depth perception. We lose a lot of different ability to kind of see different distances. Okay. So when we look at the brain signals, what happens is the eyes will see an image. It will convert it to the electrical signal down the retina to the back part of the brain where the brain will identify it. Then what happens is the back part of the brain will see it. The middle part of the brain will identify what it is. The kind of top area of the brain will decide whether or not we need to do anything about it. The front part of the brain will decide it's time to do something with that information. And then the mid part of the brain will make something happen. Okay. So the idea behind it is if I throw something at a patient and I go to throw it, the patient will see the object and say, okay, that's a clip. The clip's coming at me. I need to move out of the way. It's time for me to move out of the way. And then the clip would move out of the way. So that electrical signal gets passed through the neural network to different parts of the brain to interpret what's happening and make decisions with the information that's being given. What happens with concussions is we disrupt that electrical signal inside the brain. So instead of having a nice smooth transition where we're seeing it, identifying it, passing it, and moving around, we essentially get misfires that happen or miscommunications that happen. So instead of being able to process immediately, we struggle with the processing speed. Okay, so when I have somebody who's got a concussion, what happens during the injury itself is the brain does not slosh and smack into the different ridges of the skull and the different areas of the skull like we used to tell people for a long time. We told people for a long time that the skull is like a bowl of jello, that if you hit the skull, the jello wiggles. Okay, same concept. If you hit the skull, the brain will move. That analogy misses the second half of the skull that has a lot of fluid and pressure and kind of keeps the brain from sloshing around. Now, it does move, okay? But generally, when I'm explaining it to people who don't necessarily understand brain anatomy or neural anatomy, I try to break it down into basics. You've got two parts of the brain. You've got the cortex, the squishy pink part that everybody knows and loves. And then you've got the midbrain, which is where we are, okay? The goal of the cortex is to essentially cover and protect the midbrain, protect who we are, where we are. During a concussion, what happens is that cortex will shift. So the brain doesn't necessarily move like we used to tell people, but the cortex will shift. That cortex shifting will take the neurons that carry the electrical signals from the inside to the outside part of the brain, and it will make them slide. You get hit hard enough, you get a big enough movement, you get a big enough adjusting and body positioning or head positioning, and those neurons that carry the electrical signal from the inside to the outside will shift apart. When they shift, they break. When they break, they fire. When the brain gets hurt, it fires all of its electrical signals. The brain essentially releases every hormone that your brain either stores, controls, or produces out into the bloodstream at the same time. So you think about what happens when you get hit is all of a sudden every hormone that your brain is in control of is out in the bloodstream, and your brain feels an electrical storm that essentially happens. That triggers the brain to go, uh oh, something's not right, and it physically slows itself down while it tries to heal. The problem is when the brain slows down is our human body is a perfect check and balance system. When one thing doesn't work well, something makes up the slack. So when your brain slows down, the rest of your body is trying to speed you back up. And during concussion recovery, that's where a lot of the symptoms come from. The primary culprit people run into is the eyes. The eyes will start to rapidly dart around to try to bring information into the brain. The brain can't handle the influx of visual input, so it fights back by blurring your vision. It gives you double vision, takes the outer portion of your vision, makes it a little bit hazy and wavy at times, keeps the inside portion clear and in focus. It makes you really sensitive to the lights, because if I can get you sensitive to the lights, you'll squint. If you squint, you'll cut down your peripheral vision. If you cut down your peripheral vision, that's less the brain has to take into consideration, and it's less the brain has to work with. Okay, so when we start looking at concussions, concussions are not structural damage. Again, big picture, not structural damage. They are a disruption, though, of the electrical signals inside the brain. That electrical signal disruption will cause what's called an energy crisis in the body. Okay, now again, this is a little bit complex for people, but it's one of the primary fundamental things that all of the patients that I work with need to understand. Because I am a firm believer that concussion recovery does not happen until somebody truly understands what's happening. Okay. It's a weird way to say it, but nobody necessarily in the big picture, it's harder to recover if they don't understand what's going on, which is why when I built the clinic and how I treat my patients is I spend a ton of time going through and educating people on the mechanism, the understanding the neurometabolic cascade, what is actually happening. That way, it takes a lot of the guesswork out. One thing I've learned over the course of the 6 years of actually 7 years of actually working with the clinic and the 3 years prior to it that we're all planning is nobody gets concussion education until something happened, right? Most people that I deal with, that I work with on a regular basis, they don't have much concussion education by the time they get to me, which can be scary because I get patients that are 6 months down the road, 9 months down the road, 3 months down the road. I ask them, hey, has anybody talked to you about what concussions actually are? No. My paperwork from the emergency room just said I have a concussion. Or they didn't even say anything about a concussion. I heard from you from a friend, or I knew somebody that you treated, and that's why I came and found you. So, one of the things that I refuse to sacrifice with patients is that educational process or the educational understanding of fundamentally what is going on during concussion recovery. So, when we look at what a concussion is, concussions are a traumatic brain injury that cause a disruption in the electrical signal inside the brain. Okay, so we have to figure out what part of the electrical signal is disrupted, and we have to remind the brain that it knows what it's doing and reconnect those neural connections through a process what's called neuroplasticity. So now that we have a basic understanding and kind of framework on what concussions are, now we can go into a little bit more on the idea behind the misconceptions of concussions. So when we start talking about misconceptions of concussions, the idea is concussion information is evolving so much, so rapidly, that it is very difficult for people at times to see or keep up to date with that educational background, right? So to keep up to date with how things have changed, to keep up with overall what everything looks like during concussion recovery or what the new research is telling us. So when we talk about one of the primary misconceptions that I deal with on a regular basis with concussions is concussion recovery doesn't go as quickly as everybody wants to think. Okay. For a long time, we told everybody that concussion recovery happened within 7 to 10 days. Okay. Realistically, the neurometabolic cascade that happens after concussion takes a minimum of 30 days. Okay. So if we start looking at overall that injury recovery timeline, it is out the window. 50% of patients over the age of 18 will be symptomatic at 6 months. Okay, that's not 10 days, that's not 7 days. So most people's understanding of concussions tends to come from sports. You get hurt on Sunday, you play next Sunday, you get hurt on Friday, you play next Friday, and they generally think everybody recovers very quickly. I am here to tell you that realistically, people do not recover very quickly. And in the sports world, they may not necessarily be as completely healed as we think they are. Okay, so when we start looking at one of the primary misconceptions with concussions is everybody, even the people I work with, the insurance companies, the providers that I work with, everybody has a timeline on when concussions should get better. Okay, does not necessarily mean that it's going to happen in that timeline. And I'm here to tell you that every single one of you is unique. So if you get a concussion tomorrow, God forbid, I don't ever want to have to work with anybody. My whole goal is I've built this clinic and that I will be out of a job at some point. That you get hurt as soon as you see the first sign of getting hurt, you can take a supplement or a medicine, or you can go get an implant or a electrical charge or a jump start, and everything goes back to normal. Like that is my goal in life, is to build this thing and never have to use it. So when I start looking at people who need it, one of those common misconceptions is not everybody bounces back quickly. I can also tell you, not everybody's concussion recovery is difficult. Some people, they get hurt and it's a pretty steady improvement, right? The first day or two is really rough, and then over a short course of time, they get better and better and better, and things go back to normal relatively quickly. Realistically, though, not everybody goes through that same process. Not everybody goes through that short kind of recovery span, which is why I have a job. Okay, it's why I have the clinic that I do. It's built on those people that do not get better. Okay, so we have to worry about kind of how we navigate through concussion recovery and the expectations that we set early on. Another common misconception that we have in the concussion world, this one primarily comes in the sports world, is you don't actually have to get hit in the head to get a concussion. Okay. It's crazy to think about. Forever, we thought that you had to lose consciousness to get a concussion. And now we know that less than 5% of concussions out there actually lose consciousness. Okay. So as we go through and we're evolving, don't fall into the trap that, well, I didn't lose consciousness. It's not a concussion. I didn't hit my head. It's not a concussion. You'd be surprised at how many people that I have that were involved in car accidents that will come in and be like, I didn't hit my head. Okay. Just because you didn't hit your head doesn't mean there wasn't a rapid movement of your body or your head and neck. One of the analogies I kind of talk about is the difference between you getting in a car accident at 30 miles an hour versus an Indy car getting in a car accident at 230 miles an hour. What's the biggest difference? Well, the biggest difference is the way the force is dissipated through the car, right? In auto sports or in Indy racing and NASCAR, they have a device that holds the head back against the seat because it takes that whiplash and head movement out of it. If you've ever seen an accident during the Indy 500, I'm an Indiana guy, right? Living in the Midwest, the Indianapolis 500 is a big deal in my family, born and raised on it. So when we start looking at it, like watching an Indy wreck, the car disintegrates, right? The whole idea behind those race cars is they're designed to fall apart. So the force gets dissipated around the capsule that the driver sits in that keeps everything nice and steady and nice and kind of controlled. So when we look at kind of the common misconception of having to hit your head, you'd be surprised at how many people are diagnosed with whiplash after a car injury or a car accident, go through physical therapy, go through treatment that looks at neck structure and function, and for whatever reason the neck starts to feel better, but the headaches are still there. They're still dizzy. They're diagnosed with complex migraines. They try medication. They're diagnosed with medication resistant complex migraines, and they're told that, hey man, this is forever. You're just going to have to navigate it and do everything you can to control it. Well, if you'd have looked at eye movement, if you'd have looked at the inner ear, if you'd have looked at the traditional concussion treatment, you'd be surprised at how many people will actually get better with treating them like a concussion versus treating it like a whiplash injury, because it's not a whiplash injury. Okay. So, common misconception number two, you don't have to hit your head to get a concussion. Rapid falls, jolting of the body, rapid change of directions. I'll give the analogy that when somebody's talking to me, if you've ever sneezed really hard and all of a sudden like your eyes go blurry and your kind of head and your ears ring a little bit and you're like, whoa, that was weird. That was just a sneeze. You've disrupted some neural connections, right? So you've broken some of those neural connections. They've fired. Your brain goes, okay, that wasn't bad enough. We're back to normal. Okay. So when we start looking at the actual mechanism of injury itself, You don't actually have to hit your head to get a concussion. And then the third common misconception that I see most often in the clinic is the idea behind every concussion should present with the same timelines. Okay. Everybody should go from being miserable to back to normal perfectly, really, really consistently. Concussion recovery is not linear. We don't go from feeling terrible to feeling great over a short course of time in a nice, smooth trend line up. Everybody, myself included, wants people to go from being terrible to great and a nice, steady upward trajectory. Realistically, concussion recovery is kind of like a roller coaster. There's good days and bad days. There's good hours and bad hours. There's good days, and then there's bad couple days, and then there's good couple hours and bad couple hours. It is a roller coaster up and down, making it so people believe that when there is an making people believe that when they're in their roller coaster ride, or when they are going up and down with their symptom fluctuation, and that they're doing something wrong because their symptoms aren't tracking linearly or they're not consistently improving over time, is doing a disservice to the person and is doing a disservice to the complexity of the injury itself. Concussion recovery is not a linear process. There will be ups and downs, and it's nothing that you are doing wrong. We have to control the ups and downs. When I talk with my patients about the concussion rehab process, I am very transparent. Early on, my first goal is to take your really good days away from you and take your really bad days away from you. I want you to sit right along the line of level. Okay, because if you have really good days, generally really good days lead to you doing too much, and you will come down and have a couple really bad days in a row. When you have really bad days, it'll affect mental health because you're sitting here going, this is forever, I'm not going to get better. And the more bad days you have in a row, the harder it is to find good again and to stack good days back on top of each other. So when we start looking at common misconception number 3, concussion recovery is different for everybody, and it is not a linear process. Even if you've had a concussion before, it doesn't mean that your recovery is going to follow the same trajectory or the same trend. Some people's do, but that's not realistically what happens. Each individual injury is unique, even if it happened the exact same way with the exact same amount of force, the exact same time frame, but the person's chemical makeup inside the brain at the time of injury is different every single time. So don't fall into the misconception of, I've had a concussion before, I know exactly how this is going to go. And if it doesn't follow that timeline, it's because it doesn't happen that way. Okay. Concussion recovery is a unique process that will differ for everybody. So now let's talk a little bit about why concussion symptoms evolve. Okay. The evolution of concussion symptoms. I kind of touched on it a little bit with the misconception side of things. Everybody expects to be really miserable early on, and then as they get better, becoming less miserable, less symptomatic, less intense, less duration, less and less and less symptoms until all of a sudden they feel back to their normal selves. Realistically, concussion intensity will change on a day-to-day basis. I will even venture to say early on, until we can figure out where the triggers are coming from, they're changing on an hour-to-hour or minute-to-minute basis for some people. Okay, there's a lot of up and down with concussion recovery, especially early on when it comes to symptom management. Part of the recovery process, and I will venture to say the most challenging part for a patient, is to understand where the symptom triggers are coming from and how to navigate their concussion recovery based on their symptoms themselves. Concussion recovery is a fine line between doing too much and not doing enough. We have to identify where that fine line is. One of the biggest challenges is that that fine line is going to change. If I give a patient 10 things to do for the next 10 days, they may feel 10 different ways afterwards. And that's the frustration as the treating side of things that I have, is we have to identify what part of their movement, what part of their vision, what part of their eye movement or motility that we run into that's causing these symptoms to go up and down. Concussion symptoms will change over time, not just intensity or duration of symptoms being their intensity, consistency of symptoms. Symptoms themselves will change. I get people all the time that are involved in car accidents, and they're like, well, hey, man, for the first couple hours, I felt great. Adrenaline was really high. And then as the adrenaline comes down, symptoms start to come up. And then they'll start to notice that, yeah, early on I had a headache, but it wasn't bad. And now all of a sudden, I'm 2 weeks down the road and I'm dizzy. I'm nauseous. I'm lightheaded. I've got trouble concentrating. That I didn't have that at the beginning. That symptom evolution is challenging to navigate because people will start to start to blame other things, especially if they don't have any concussion education. They start through the natural progression of human nature. If I break my arm, I can see it, right? Let's say I have a compound fracture of my arm after a car accident. I can look down and go, you know what? That's not supposed to look that way. It really hurts. I'm going to go get treatment and somebody will take care of it because we can see that it really hurts. When we look at concussions, it doesn't show up on traditional imaging. It doesn't show up on CT scans, X-rays, MRIs. Very rarely does it show up on, some of the advanced testing that we can do from a memory standpoint or a vision or an eye motility standpoint because of the evolution side of the injury. There are good days and bad days, good hours and bad hours, and it never fails. When somebody is finally resolved into, hey, I'm going to go talk to somebody or I'm going to go see somebody and finally get some help, it's a good day. And they go in going, you know what? It's not that bad. Although if you ask me in 2 hours, it'll be terrible. And then you get somebody who doesn't understand concussions and that causes problems. They don't understand the ebbs and flows or the up and down of the emotional or symptom roller coaster. Now, all of a sudden we run into this issue where it's like, hey, look, I can't explain why right now I can track, but if you ask me again in 20 minutes, my vision's so blurry, I can't see anything. Or if you ask me to go drive my car to work in the morning, I can do it fine. But if you ask me to drive home at the end of the day, I can't see anything. All I see is shapes. Okay. The evolution of concussion symptoms, not only is it severity or consistency of the symptoms themselves, you'll also run into differences in concussion symptoms and different symptoms at the different parts of the recovery timeline. The one consistent symptom that almost every single person will deal with is fatigue. Days where you feel good, you're tired. Days where you don't feel good, you're really tired. All you want to do all day is sleep and you can't sleep. And then you have the flip side of the converse of it where all you want to do is sleep all day. And even though you slept all day, you don't have enough energy to continue to get up and do anything. Concussions cause an energy crisis in the body. There's not enough energy to go around to do normal function. So how it conserves energy is it burns through glucose stores and you use your rapid energy that's available, or it starts to shut down complex systems. When people start talking about the difference between fatigue and concussions and the difference between like I just had a busy day and I'm tired is the idea that neurofatigue is very different. I talk in analogies a lot with people. When I start talking about physical fatigue, right? I'm tired. I had a busy day. I can come home and sit on my couch and sit back and go, you know what, man? That was a tough day. I could take a couple deep breaths. I could sit here for 10 to 15 minutes and then I can get up and continue to move on. Neurofatigue is kind of like a bug on a windshield. I'm flying around through the day. Things are going okay. I'm not feeling great. Then all of a sudden I run out of energy. And it's like, okay, I'm doing okay. I'm at the grocery store. And now all of a sudden I have no more energy left. When it comes to the idea or the concept of neurofatigue, now we're starting to look at, okay, I don't have the ability to communicate. I can't think straight. I can't process information. I'm dizzy. I'm nauseous. I lose coordination or balance function. I can't make a critical decision. Do I go home or do I sit in the car? I can't make those decisions because there's a lack of energy. And all of a sudden, I have to get out of here. Okay. When we start looking at the concept of symptom evolution, a lot of it has to do with the energy level at the time the symptoms fluctuate. Okay. And we're not talking like get up and go take the trash out energy. We're talking about the energy molecule ATP. The number one producer of the energy source in the body is the brain. When the brain gets hurt, it cuts its energy production. Not only is the brain cutting its energy production, it's requiring a significant amount more of energy to function on a regular basis. So when we start to look at the idea behind symptom evolution, depending on how tired somebody is, depending on how high quality sleep they get, depending on external factors, too many people, too much noise, too much movement, the environment's too chaotic, we run into fluctuation of symptoms. Symptoms are going to evolve on the micro scale, minute to minute, hour to hour. Okay. They're also going to evolve on the macro scale, day to day, week to week, month to month. Okay, so when we look at concussions and their symptom evolution, just because you didn't have a symptom at the beginning and you're dealing with it now does not mean that you're making it up or that it's in your head or the terrible catch-all thing that happens in the medical world at all times. Well, you just have anxiety. It is not anxiety. You are not anxious. The brain is anxious. There's a very big difference between the brain being anxious and an individual being anxious. Anxiety to the brain is a neuron disconnection. Some neurons going fast, some neurons going slow, other neurons firing in a sweet spot where we want them to be. True anxiety is a hormone response. It's an imbalance of the hormones that will cause fluctuation in those neurons. So when we look at somebody talking about anxiety, one of the biggest challenges is getting somebody to understand the concept that you're not anxious, that your brain is anxious. So overall concussion symptom evolution is going to change minute to minute. It may change day to day, and it's not happening in your head. It's in your head. It's one of the wild things to get people to understand. There is scientific physiological explanations for why symptoms change. It's not happening inside your head, but it is happening inside the brain itself. So finally, the big thing that I want to talk about during today's, live webinar that we're having is the idea behind advocating for your own needs or for the needs of an individual that you're helping or the needs of your patient during concussion recovery. One of the hardest things for people to navigate through concussion recovery is the feeling of isolation. Nobody believes me, nobody understands. I'm doing this myself and I have nobody here to help me. Again, going back to the analogy of my broken arm from earlier. Okay. If I have a broken arm and I'm wearing a cast, people will walk up to me on the street and be like, man, he's got a cast on. I'm going to hold the door for him. I'm going to help him up out of the chair. I'm going to do things to help take care of him. If I have somebody with a concussion that's disoriented walking down the street, one of the first things they're going to try to figure out is why that guy's drunk at 9 a.m. stumbling all over the sidewalk. Okay. Nobody immediately jumps to, well, maybe he has a brain injury. Like, okay, well, he was really mean to me yesterday. He just probably doesn't like me. Nobody thinks that it's hard to regulate emotions after a concussion. So when we start looking at the concept or the idea behind, advocating for yourself, when it comes to concussion patients, one of the hardest things for people to do is to go through that navigation of trying to get symptoms or trying to get people to understand what's going on early. Okay. So again, advocating for yourself during concussion needs, the first thing that you need to do and the first thing that people will need to understand is it's okay to ask for help. Okay. Now, I am somebody who works in the medical world. I live in the real world. It's easier said than done to ask for help, especially if I've asked for help and the person that I asked does not understand or does not get it. Because it'll happen to almost every single person that has a longer recovery. At some point, their support system will not understand. How would you have 3 really good days in a row and you were yourself for 3 days and we went out and did all these things and we had so much fun and I got to see you again, but now all of a sudden you can't get out of bed again? People don't understand it. Unless they've been through it, they won't understand why all of a sudden I have to leave the baseball game that I was at for my nephew and everybody gets mad because you can't even stay for a t-ball game. No, I have to leave. I can't see straight. I'm getting dizzy, disoriented. I can't handle this. I have to leave. It's one of the hardest things for patients, for the support system, and for providers to be able to relay to each other. It is very important when you're navigating through your concussion recovery that we can establish some form of a concussion care team. When I'm working with a patient, one of the first things that I tell them is that I don't care what you tell anybody else, but there are 3 people that you have to be brutally honest with during concussion recovery. Number 1, yourself. You have to be honest with how you're feeling. It is very, very hard not to try to put on a face to try to appear normal or to be normal. You have to be honest with how you're feeling. If you're having a good day, do a little bit more. If you're having a bad day, you have to be honest and set a boundary that sits there and says, hey, you know what? I don't have the ability to do this anymore. This happens for all chronic illness patients, right? This happens for people that are dealing with traumatic brain injuries, with MS, with lupus or Lyme disease, or any number of autonomic diagnoses or neurodegenerative diseases. It's one of the hardest things for people to do is to understand that when you need help, it's okay to ask for help. It's not, it's not something that sits in just the medical world either. It's hard for me as a small business owner. I absolutely hate asking people for help. Do you know why? Because I hate to inconvenience people. This isn't your burden. This is my burden. I'll take care of it. And I can tell you, I wouldn't be where I'm at without my support system because my wife is the greatest support system that I could have ever asked for. She knows what to say, how to say it, and what she can do to help take things off of my plate. So when I'm working with a patient, especially early on, one of the hardest things in the world to do is to get you to understand that the three people you have to be honest with right off the bat is yourself, whoever's helping navigate your concussion recovery. I am very much I treat people, not numbers. One of the reasons why I don't want to, expand this concussion clinic to be, worldwide with people all over the place or, tomorrow is I have to build it the right way. Okay. I don't want people who can come in and be like, yeah, I know what to do. Okay, great. It's not hard to put the pieces back together after a concussion, but caring for people and doing it correctly while keeping the people that you're treating first and foremost as family, not as numbers, is very, very important to the Midwest Concussion Clinic. It's important to me. Every person that I meet, my whole goal in life is to make sure that you're doing better than I'm doing. So when it comes to me helping patients through concussion recovery, you are family. I'm going to treat you just like my brother or sister or treat you like my mom or dad. I am going to take care of you. So when we start looking at establishing and advocating for concussion recovery, the first thing we have to do is you and I have to be honest with each other. And then we have to find a third party that we can bring into the fold. If I have somebody who's married or in a relationship, it's a spouse. If I have somebody who's a younger patient, they have a mom or dad, or it's somebody that they can go to as a friend or a brother or sister. One of the first appointments, I am going to try to bring them into the appointment to make sure that all three of us can get on the same page. It can be really challenging if somebody does not have someone outside of the person that they're working with to navigate their recovery on their side. And I will tell you, it is very isolating if we have to sit here and say, okay, who are you going to help? Who are you going to have us, meet or help navigate your concussion recovery? And if you don't have anybody, hey, we're going to work through it. Okay. It's hard. It makes it a lot harder if we have some, we don't have a third party that can be with you. Because as much as I love working with my patients, I work with somebody for an hour at a time, right? When I'm done with one patient, I move on to the next patient. I'm available and here to help you and go through it, but I'm not with you 24/7 like some of the other support systems are. So God forbid I ever get hurt, I know exactly who my support system is. I'm going to find a concussion provider, which thankfully I hope I will never have to use them, but I know a bunch of them. And then I have my wife. That is my support team. Okay. Everybody else, you can tell whatever you want to tell them on how you're feeling. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. How you doing today? I'm good. I'm fine. But as long as you keep the honesty between yourself, whoever's helping navigate your concussion recovery, and the head of your support system, things will get a lot easier. The challenge is we have to continually communicate what we need. Again, I work in the medical world. I can tell you all of these things. Implementation and practice of open communication is one of the worst parts of life, not just injury navigation or advocacy, right? Communication is a consistent key problem in every single aspect of life. Communication doesn't work or it breaks down, recovery tends to not go well. Businesses fail, things will fall apart. So we have to look at when we're navigating brain injury recovery, we have to make sure that we're constantly communicating as all parties of that concussion support team. I can't assume that my patient knows what I'm thinking. I can't assume that as a patient, my support system knows what I'm thinking. I have no idea how anybody else feels. Every single patient that I work with, I have no clue how they feel. I can tell you, I will listen, I will empathize, and I will provide as much clarity to how they feel and the rationale behind how they feel and what we can do to make actionable, measurable steps to get better. But I have no idea how they feel. So when we sit here, we never know what somebody else is going through. We have no idea what the next person that's standing beside us is going through in life. We have to assume that we can sit down and communicate with each other if needed. So when I'm working with my concussion patients, the key takeaway is we have to make sure that we're establishing guidelines on what each person needs. We have to set boundaries. We have to openly communicate with those around us, making sure that they understand, hey, look, I need you this way. I need you to be here for me every day. As somebody, when I'm hurt or sick, I want a very hands-off approach. My wife is very good at reading that for me. It's like, hey, if I'm sick, just leave me alone. I'm fine. It's my burden to cross, not yours. So when we sit down, we look at it, being honest with somebody during that is like, hey, look, I need some time right now. As a person who's advocating for somebody else, you can still be there without being nagging or constantly being there. One of the hardest things for a support team to learn is that when I break my arm, I can do things, right? So when I have when if I break my arm, my wife can help carry things. She can help me get in and out of the car. She can help me do things, right? But if I can't see the injury or I don't know how to help, one of the default settings that the advocate support team will go to is, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? Hey, you doing okay? How you feeling? You don't look good today. You feeling all right? Should you be doing that? Oh, come on, you can do this. How are you feeling? How are you feeling? You want to know what gets really old? How are you feeling? Awful, terrible, not great, the same as yesterday, the same as 3 days ago, the same as 6 minutes ago when you asked me last time. I'm fine. And it's one of those things that we have to sit down and talk about. Like, hey, look, some people will like that. Most people don't ask how I'm doing. I will communicate with you how I'm feeling. But if you're constantly asking how I feel, it can have a negative effect to it. So when we look at the challenge with being an advocate for somebody, whether it's a patient advocate or being a family member or part of the support team, is we have to make sure that we're understanding what that person needs and knowing it is going to change. Just because they wanted you to be there 24/7 for the first 3 days doesn't mean at the 6 week mark that they want you there all the time, all day, every day. That's not realistic. So making sure that we're establishing communication guidelines and constantly updating what we need where we're at. Again, communication is key in everything, especially when we're going through and advocating for what we need during concussion recovery. Communication does not have to be verbal. It is okay to type something out, to write it down, to record a voice message in another room and send it to somebody and play it to somebody. I am the least confrontational person you will ever meet. To a fault, it's terrible. Okay. I am non confrontational at all. So if there's something that I need that I'm not getting, it would be hard for me to sit here and say, you know what? I want to sit down one on one, face to face, and I want to talk through this. That is very challenging for me as a person, healthy, let alone if I don't have the energy or I don't have the ability to communicate the way that I'm used to, or I'm struggling with words, or I'm vulnerable and need help, but don't know how to relay that to somebody else. So if I'm working with a patient who's really struggling with the open communication, one of those key things that I will recommend for them is to journal, write things down, talk about the end of the day, how things were going, just try to put it down on a voice text. We have all of these different AI tools that we can use now and virtual assistants that we can use now to get what's going on up here down where somebody else can interpret it or read through it. So when we're sitting here looking at it, the key for advocacy, for advocating for what you need during concussion recovery is, number one, figuring out what you need, right? As dumb as that sounds, or as silly of a concept as that is, you can't expect the people around you to give you what you need if you don't know what you need. Okay. So once we establish that you understand what type of help that you're after, what type of knowledge or what type of kind of background that you need or support that you need. Now that we've established that, we need to establish the communication channels with all of those that are involved in your concussion recovery. On the flip side of that, I've spent a lot of time talking about small, recovery teams. I am one that has two really, 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 really good families. Okay. My family is top notch, right? My in-laws have been around for most of my life. I've known them forever. I have both sides, my family and my wife's family are the greatest family of all time. In my opinion, yes, I'm biased. Okay. So when I sit here and look at it, like if I got hurt, one of the most challenging things I would have to do is to try to build a barrier around who needs to be directly involved and whose outside support will take energy away from trying to keep the main thing, right? So when we sit down and look at trying to establish that advocacy group or trying to establish that team, you don't owe anybody anything. You don't owe anybody outside of that immediate team. Bare minimum 2 to 3 people, bare maximum 5 people. You don't owe anybody anything. How are you doing? I'm doing okay. I'll update you as you need. And then as I have my narrow concussion support team, that's where they can help you with the people that are outside of that immediate circle. One of the things that would happen is I would want to keep my mom updated on what's going on and how I'm feeling. I may not have the time, the energy, the effort to directly update my mom. So I would expect my wife to be able to update my mom, to update my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, to make sure that people around me, to let my dad and my brother know that, hey, you know what? Just because I'm not responding doesn't mean that I'm not okay. I am here. I'm okay. So when we start looking at that concussion care team or setting up that advocacy, we want to kind of layer it, right? So we have our immediate group. We have a small group that's on the inner circle, and then we have the layers coming out on the people that need to know and whatnot. Okay. I work primarily with adults. One of the hardest things that we have to look at is the balancing between how much I let my employer know what's happening versus what they need to know versus what would get me in trouble if something were to happen liability wise. So we start looking at, okay, how do we layer in that external support system? How do we make sure that we're layering in that return to work or that employer or that direct supervisor? How do we navigate that? And I will tell you, that is where people like me come involved. I am not doing anything unique. Okay. Again, from a business perspective, I've built a very unique business. I will put what I do and the services I offer against anybody in this space. Okay. But it's nothing that is unique to me. It's not proprietary formula. It's not proprietary technology. It's the implementation of the tools that are available to us. There are people like me all over the world that can help you through your concussion recovery. When I have a patient that works directly with me, I offer that service to them. Hey, your employer doesn't understand. I'm going to put a letter together to give to your employer that's going to give general information. It's not going to go into specifics for you. It's not going to go into specifics about how you're feeling. It's going to talk generally with concussions. This is what happens. Here's where some limitations might show up. And here's how you can help as a external support. If it comes down to a patient losing their job versus learning more, I have scheduled meetings with employers, right? One of the first times I ever did this, I sat down with an elder board at a church and talked about, hey, this is what we need to do to make sure that the person that you know as an employee is getting the support that I know as a friend. So we want to make sure that we're getting everybody on the same page. You don't have to do that alone. And that's one of the last key takeaways for the advocacy side. No matter how much people may not get it, no matter how much people don't understand or want to downplay how you're feeling or don't get the injury themselves or want to completely dismiss you and write you off, there are people like me out here that will help you. There are people that are out here that will help you understand. There are people that are out here that will help you go through and figure out how to set up your concussion advocacy team to ensure that you are getting the proper treatment, the proper help, and the proper navigation through your concussion recovery. All right, I'm reading through, just making sure that I don't have any questions that came up during the process. If you have any questions at all about anything, whether it's from the topic from today, something that you want to know about concussions, or something that you just generally want to know, I am very accessible. I am for the people. One of the things that I pride myself on is my availability to reach out to. If I've got somebody who has a question, I will answer it. If I can't give specifics because you're not a patient of mine, I will make sure that I point you in the right direction and try to get you that general information that you need to establish that care. And then if you're looking to work with somebody like me, I am available to work with people. Okay. The Midwest Concussion Clinic is one of those things that I have built to be my baby and will continue to grow moving forward. And one of the things that I will always do is I will always help people. Okay. Thank you for tuning in. Again, if you didn't catch the beginning of it, every third Wednesday of the month at 12 here on TikTok and YouTube Live, I will go through and put together a webinar series that's called the Midwest Concussion Clinic Monthly Lunch and Learn. I do it during a lunch hour. It's always held up on our YouTube. It will always be recorded and put out there. This is number 10 or 11. I thought it was 12 earlier. This is number 10 or 11 that we've done. You can catch the replays on all of them. They're all about 45 minutes to an hour long. Clips are broken down to make sure that they're out there. If you have a topic that you want to know about, shoot it to me. I would love to go through and expand on a topic that a patient has versus me trying to figure out what the world needs to know about concussions as some random person on TikTok talking to a camera. Okay. Again, thank you very much for allowing me to do what I do. My name is Matt. I am the owner of the virtual Midwest Concussion Clinic. You can find me on all social media at MW Concussion. You can find our website, mwconcussion.com. If you're a patient who wants to get in, wants to learn about what we do, you can schedule your initial evaluation. You can schedule a consultation on the website. Very easy. You can also call me. My number is 260-200-3735. Again, it's a little bit harder to call me at times because when I work with a patient, I won't answer a phone call. But the website is always up and running. You can always email me, shoot me a text message, and then if we need to carry on a conversation on the phone, I will call you back when I get a break. All right, guys, I appreciate it. I hope everybody has a great rest of your week. For those of you that are new to me, Indiana Hoosiers National Championship, proud alumni 2013. Went back through and had to look at it, and we won 14 games in my 4 years there. And I worked a season where we were 1-11 as an athletic training student, and boy, was it rough. So to be where we were, to be where they are now is really cool to see. For those of you that are not Indiana Hoosier fans, I'm sorry. Our fan base is really excited, really proud. You guys are going to hear about it for a long time, but that's what makes things great. And with the Roll Tide comments, hey, I can say it. We got crucified at the beginning of the year for chanting "We want Bama" after we won our second game of the season. It worked out for us this year, but I look forward to more IU Bama matchups in the future. I appreciate everyone. Those of you on TikTok, thanks for stopping in. YouTube, I appreciate you. Look forward to hearing from you guys soon. Final key takeaway: be kind to people. It's free to be nice. You don't have to be mean to everybody. We don't know what anybody else is going through. Be nice, get along, and I hope I never have to treat any of you. Take care.